Traffickers often find their victims outside of schools, outside of youth programs, shelters, foster homes, group homes, bus stations, and truck stops, halfway houses, restaurants, bars, and exotic dance clubs, shopping malls, parks, and playgrounds, through abduction, through purchase or trade from another pimp, through false newspaper advertisements and social media such as Facebook.com, Backpage.com, Craigslist.com, Instagram, and Snapchat. And also, as mentioned, victims themselves can be forced into recruiting their friends and other potential victims from shelter or homes. Take a moment to answer whether this statement is true or false. The correct answer is true. The National Institute for Missing, Abducted, Runaway, and Throwaway Children estimates that nationally 1.6 million children run away from home each year, and that one out of every three teens on the street will be lured to the sex industry within 48 hours of leaving home. So, how are victims lured in? Sex trafficking victims are often manipulated with an initial period of false love and affection that includes warmth, gifts, compliments, as well as sexual and physical intimacy. They often promise victims a better life and fast money. This is very purposeful and premeditated to hone in on the victim's vulnerabilities. The trafficker may provide food, shelter, or clothing to show that they care about the individual and to gain their trust by meeting their basic needs. Sex traffickers often groom or season their victims prior to exploiting them. This is a two-stage process where stage 1, the victim is made to feel attractive and wanted by the trafficker or the pimp spending money on him or her and giving him or her special treatment. Once trust is fully gained, stage 2, the trafficker or pimp breaks the victim's will through physical, sexual, or verbal abuse to prepare him or her for exploitation. This type of grooming is especially in cases of sex trafficking, and oftentimes this is how youth are lured in. This is not to say that this is the only way to lure kids in, but it is one of the most common ways. Now, let's look at where victims are being trafficked. Victims who are being exploited for sex are usually being trafficked in massage parlors, escort services, street prostitution, strip clubs, truck stops, and other areas. Victims who are being exploited for labor are usually being trafficked in restaurants, hotels, casinos, construction, hair and nail salons, agriculture, and farm work, as well as other areas. This scenario, as well as following ones, are of calls received by the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. Name and other identifying information has been changed and or omitted to preserve confidentiality. Information regarding the National Human Trafficking Resource Center mentioned in the scenarios will be provided later in the module under the Resources section. Please take a moment to read the following scenarios. So, how are victims controlled once they're lured in? This trafficking power and control wheel is very similar to the domestic violence power and control wheel. Labor trafficking, and especially sex trafficking, oftentimes mirror the dynamics of domestic violence, with traffickers utilizing similar tactics and conditions of power and control. The physical, sexual, psychological, emotional, and economic abuses used in both situations are very similar. Perpetrators of both oftentimes use coercion, intimidation, isolation, threats, control of finances and or children to make victims comply. They are also known to use a mix of loyalty, fear, and dependence, making it difficult for a victim to seek help or leave. This also often may cause victims of both situations to relapse and return to their perpetrator or abusive relationships even if they seek help and services. Please take a moment and look at the full wheel. This scenario is also of a call received by the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. Name and other identifying information has been changed and or omitted to preserve confidentiality. This is a case example of how human trafficking and domestic violence can intersect at times and how a potential trafficking situation can stay hidden by individuals thinking it may be a domestic violence case and that there is no other crime beyond it. Please take a moment and read. So, what signs and red flags should an individual look out for in order to identify a trafficking victim? Here is a list of things to look out for, but note that it's important not only to look out for one sign, but to look out for a pattern of these when identifying a potential victim. Red flags include an adult or child who has few or no personal items, has no control of their finances or documents, is unpaid, underpaid, or paid only through tips, works excessively long or unusual hours, has limited knowledge and whereabouts, loss of sense of time, has limited freedom to leave working and living conditions, lives and works in the same place, has signs of trauma, fatigue, injuries, or abuse, has multiple residencies within a brief period, frequently travels to other cities, frequently living in a hotel, having hotel keys, and is controlled or has restricted communications, has excessive fearfulness of law enforcement or is non cooperative, has expensive gifts or multiple cell phones that they may not be able to afford, has suspicious jewelry or a branding tattoo, sometimes a barcode or a tattoo saying daddy or daddy's girl. Some red flags to look out for, especially in minors, are a minor engaged in sexual behaviors beyond age specific norms and or having a noticeably older boyfriend, for example, 10 years or older, a minor with STIs or STDs and or having a need for pregnancy tests or abortion, a minor with unexplained absences from school for a period of time, a minor running away chronically from home, foster care, or other type of shelter or facility.